Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Nicole. Today's first up. I guess we do have to set the scene. It goes without saying that it is quite grim, and I'll just run through some information there with you. I've got some slides just to set the scene, and we'll go from there. That's just a snapshot. We've been updating this year just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. If you're a fund manager in equities, you would call that a very risky ride. What happened was that we effectively came out of a drought, a massive one in 2009, went straight into severe flooding. We then had a few issues. Currency started to go up, which is not good for the export industry, of which the agriculture is a major one. Then we had some more Queensland flooding. 99% was a disaster zone, declared a disaster zone. We had Cyclone Yassi wipe out a bit of the north and all the bananas there. We move on, and our lovely federal government at the time decided to ban exports for some populist activity. It just goes on, and then we go back into what that has done is cause severe oversupply of cattle into markets that just couldn't handle it, and you're getting very, very low prices when you're just starting to go into quite a prolonged drought. However, so that's the roller coaster ride that the climate has served up to us, and a lot of that is in the west. Queensland is still a large percentage of it is completely drought declared. So if we move on, the survey's getting a bit old now, but there used to be a survey done every 2 years, commissioned by the Queensland Rural Adjustment Authority, and we used to do it in the early days, and then we picked it up again and did the 2011 one. Now, after gathering all the data, what we're looking for here is the trend, obviously. One of the things that came out of that whole report was the debt levels was accelerating higher than what we were actually producing. So GVP is the value of the product that we produce in Queensland in the agricultural sector, and those two lines were separating. That is alarm bells and not sustainable. If you move that forward, the 2013 survey was not done, and it was done. The government decided they didn't want to do it. But basically, I would say, if given where I sit, I would say the red line, which is the value of the product, because of the droughts and what have you, has probably drifted south, and the debt level probably hasn't gone up. There's been a fair bit of activity trying to sort of deliver, but it probably hasn't come down a lot. It may have come down a bit, but it hasn't come down a lot. So we're still getting that big gap. So what other thing is evident there is when debt goes up like that, and it's not going up because we're producing more and people are reinvesting and buying, it means something other than fundamentals was fueling that last decade's property values, and in my view it was the easy access to debt that caused, and it was a classic what we call a debt fuel bubble that still hasn't really worked its way through the system now. So I'm going to concentrate a bit on the beef, because in Queensland 50% of that debt is the beef sector. So out of the 17 billion of Queensland rural debt, about half, or 9 billion, belongs to the cattle producers. All the rest of it don't barely exceed the 10%. So concentrating on the beef, just to give you an idea of what's happened, and again we're just setting the scene as to what happened and what brings us to this point now. Just to give you an idea, so that the value of beef produced in Queensland adds to about $3 billion per year. When you've got debt at 9, you have what they call a debt to GVP ratio of 300%. Now that, I remember 2011 or 12 when everyone thought Greece was going to implode. Mind you, it still probably could. But they were at 175%, and the alarm bells around the world were starting to go off. Then you try and look at it from another angle. You say, well, okay, how many cattle are there in Queensland? And the estimates back a couple of years ago, there was 12 million. That equates to about $800 per beast. At the time, the average beast price was probably about 600. So just gives you some idea, trying to narrow it down to a per beast area. Now, obviously, when we did this survey, there were certain areas that were a lot worse than that, and there were certain areas that we didn't really have much of an issue. But in general, the statistics didn't augur well. Just to back that up, and just to try and, it's like in any evaluation, you always then come at it from a different angle to make sure that what your findings are that are backed up somewhere else. The MLA, which we're talking later on today, I think, basically issued a Northern Beef report, which had been a study going on for, I think it was close to 10 years. Their conclusions are quite, so it was quite an extensive survey. 13% is quite extensive in that, with statistics, and over 700 enterprises across 14 regions. And their conclusion was that majority of enterprises are found to be unsustainable, and that even the top 25%, their profitability was in decline. And this report was issued in 2013, and it had studied the 10 years prior. So, guys, not looking, that's the scene, but obviously we're not here today to look in a rear vision mirror. No one's here to blame anything. It's called weather, which has given us this roller coaster ride, and it's unfortunately been timed against a massive run up in leverage, which doesn't augur well. However, so moving on now, and sort of the whole point of today is to look at opportunities. What can we do? How can we do it? Just in the last 12 months, drought aside, there has been some quite significant developments in the beef sector and the grain sector. So one of the things that I went to China recently, because there's been a lot of stuff you read about China, and I'd only been there once prior, so I've been there twice this year. And just to see for myself whether this is a short-term or a long-term demand that's building there. So my second trip, I went away from Shanghai and Beijing, where everyone in those towns, there's a lot of them, are there for a purpose, and they're either there to sell you something or try and buy something. But we went this time into about the centre of China, in a place called Changsha. I've never heard of it, but it's apparently where they made the movie Avatar. So a lovely town of about 7 million people. And those guys there, we went in there because the guy that my client had been selling meat to in China, in Shanghai, he wanted to introduce us to his friend that owned 86 supermarkets, and if you put a Coles and a Woolies in Brisbane here together, that's one. That was the size of these things. And they'd never actually had Australian meat in this supermarket chain in Changsha. And so we ended up agreeing to trial 2 tonnes. So we sent 2 tonnes. It was already on the water going to the existing client, and so he agreed to transport the 2 tonnes west. We came home. 2 weeks had gone. The meat had delivered. They only put this 2 tonnes in 2 of the supermarkets. Gave it a little bit of fanfare on the WeChat and a bit of in-store marketing. It was sold out in 2 days. That group said, oh, well, let's trial 30 tonnes. So that all happened in the space of 2 weeks. And this is a town in China that not many people know of. So, that demand, I think, is real and it's coming. And so how do we take advantage of that is probably the question. That is some Tier 1 supermarkets in Shanghai we travelled around 8 different supermarkets in a day in that traffic. We don't have any problem in Brisbane compared to there, but that is quite eye-opening. I mean, that even their local rib fillet, which you'd need 2 or 3 sets of teeth to get through, was $73 a kilo. We can get Wagyu steak at my local butcher in Ashgrove for about the same value. So they're eating it, and they're willing to pay a good price for it. As an accountant, we sit there and we say, right, well, how do we get hold of this? And if I'm looking at a business, and any accountant's looking at a business, the way to turn it around or increase its financial performance is one of 3 things, or all 3. You can either increase your revenue, you can increase your productivity, i.e. Produce more of your product at an efficient price, or you can reduce your costs. Now, either one of those levers will give you a kick. If you then apply that to what's been happening in Western Queensland for the last 3 years, and you say, well, reduce costs, that's been done 2 years ago, to the point where there's no investment into those assets. It's probably a little bit detrimental, so you can't cut those anymore. You increase the productivity, yeah, that's great, but we need some grass, and we need some working capital, and we need some cattle, and we'll put a few more fences in, and we'll keep the kangaroos out, we'll put a few more waters in, and we'll be able to run a few more. But the problem is you need rain first, but then you also need capital to do that, so you need to be making money before you can embark on that. Now, the increased revenue, basically, the market takes care of this, right? And that is happening for you, which is a very, very good thing. It's a long time overdue, but it's happening and it's real. So that normally takes care of itself. If you're in the history says you're a price taker in the cattle industry, I believe you can actually do better than that and start taking control of your own price just by trying to tap into this demand. I'll talk about it later on, but the supply chain in Queensland doesn't allow that at the moment. But that said, so what does this increase in revenue, or what does it do to a set of books? And it's all very well to say I'm getting $2.60 a kilo, but what is it doing? This is what excites me. In August 2014, I had to do a presentation somewhere, and so I didn't have obviously the right-hand column. But when someone was kept in our industry, everyone's saying, "Oh, what sort of debt level we're meant to have?" The banking community, we're getting these sustainable debt reports and charging a lot, and the client was getting charged lots of money. But at the end of the day, there was only $50 left. If you were selling it at a 400 kilo beast at $1.60, really after you paid all your expenses, fixed up a few fences, you'd have $50 to pay your interest, and at 8%, you could only afford $600 and $25 per beast area. And then you would have no money left in the tin at the end of the year. You wind the clock forward, August 2015, I think, when I recalibrated that, it was $2.62, so the $1 a kilo has gone straight through to the bottom line. I even updated for a bit of inflationary expenses. All of a sudden, you got over $400 left in the tin to pay your interest. If you then divide that by 8%, all of a sudden, it's not sustainable, or maybe it is. All of a sudden you can handle $5,000 a beast area. I'm not saying that you can, but that's what $1 a kilo price movement does to the profitability of a business. So I don't know that I'd be that concerned that cattle herds are down 20% on average. Some are down well over 100. But you get where I'm coming from. That there is a glimmer of hope. So I guess the big thing is, and I can hear you all saying it, is that okay, if you don't have any grass, well, that means nothing to me. There is a big divide out there. I mean, in advising, we do it all over Queensland, and you have to be very careful. You pick up the phone and it's a call from, it starts on a 4-9 or anywhere east of the Great Divide, and they haven't had a drought. They've got plenty of cattle. They're selling them for $2.50, $3, $3.40. They're like pigs in mud. They've never had it so good. You then pick up a call, to put that call down, pick up the guy from Longridge, and it is just Armageddon. And it's made our job pretty hard. But that's nothing compared to what some of those guys are going through. Some of them completely destocked, not one beast on the property, and have been like that for a couple of years. So I guess when you're looking for opportunities, what you do, normally mates help mate, industry help within industry. My view is I think that those with cattle, and when there's rain and there's grass out west, then there's a bit of a sharing. Rather than take a hell of a lot of cash in adjustment, you might take hooves and horns and things like that. They will develop, and people will work its way. There will be people that will design some very, very out there adjustment/leasing programs, and dollars probably won't be what's exchanged. So yeah, there is a way out. We just got to try and work through it slowly and make sure that everyone's trying to achieve the same purpose. So there's a few topical issues that I'd just like to touch on, and just to try and to sort of whet people's appetite, maybe create or stimulate a bit of debate. And so I've picked a couple of topical issues just to sort of get everyone a bit either tense or want to talk more. One of the things is, and it's been a harp of mine for a while, is that I think in the cattle industry the supply chain is completely broken. Now you effectively have a lot of producers, a lot of backgrounders, a few feedlots, and then there's abattoirs, and the abattoir owners would tell you there's plenty of abattoirs, you do not need them anymore. The problem is you can't get access to that abattoir. So you can't go and find yourself a Mr. Chang Shah who wants reefer containers of beef on the Port of Brisbane, and you go into a few neighbours and get the required scale that they're looking for, or even half it, or send a few tests. You can't get last year you couldn't get a beast custom killed if you were just Mr. Producer in Queensland. Now that is, to me, that's just completely wrong, and what I'd call a completely broken supply chain. So it is. You need to be able to. One of the things we need to do is to take control of your own product and take control of it right through the supply chain, or have the ability to. So that is one key point that needs addressing today. The other is the foreign investment debate. Now, if you really look at those supply chains, I know there's a land ownership issue, but if you really look at those supply chains now, who is it that sits at the end of your supply chain in the beef sector? And I'm not singling them. The JBS, they're foreign owned. Cargill owns Tees, they're foreign. In the grain market, you have the Glencores, you have the Olems, they are all foreign owned. So what's the problem? These guys have been in our country for years, and they do a good job, and they serve the purpose, and they export our meat. I mean, I don't get what's different when they come and buy our land or buy into our land. They still have to use that supply chain. They still have to employ people. And I think what normally happens is that it's not as rosy as what it looks like when they do their due diligence. They don't hang around for too long, and history says that. And the other thing which you probably don't understand, that if AA company, which been around for a couple of hundred years, owns Australian property, do you know that they have to go to FIRB each time they make an investment decision, because the majority shareholders are foreigners? So I don't get why. This day and age, with technology and the way the global trade is, there's really not a lot of barriers anymore. So I think we need to really have a good hard look at that and try and raise that fear in people's minds. The other one is this, what I'd call the debt or equity. Now, obviously, we've just pointed out that the debt has got a few people into trouble. It's going to be hard to pay back. It's having difficulty servicing.
So if you go back and say, well, what funds a business? Well, it's either equity and or debt. Now, that's what we call in our terms the capital stack, right? And so the debt holder gets paid back before the equity guy. So this time round, after experiencing what happens when the debt holder gets nervous and the pressure he puts on the business owner, what is wrong with having an equity partner whereby and leaving minimal debt there so that there is no pecking order? There is those that need capital partnering up with those that have got it. And then when the drought comes, both share in the downside, and when the going's good, both share in the upside. There's not a lot of difference, and if there's not a lot of cash in the tin to pay a dividend, well, you don't pay a dividend. But try telling your bank you're not going to pay him interest and see what happens. So another food for thought type issue there. And I just don't think, we'll hear more from Shane. Oh, sorry, okay. The other thing I want to talk about, which I'll save till the panel, which is regional infrastructure bonds. So can someone please remind me to talk about that? Okay, thank you.